Hey guys, it's Deconic and let's talk GGG Live. If you weren't aware, GGG Live was yesterday and during it they announced a lot. Some new, some good, some bad, some mixed. And in this video, I'm going to be giving my 2 cents on the changes that were more relevant to me. And spoiler alert, some of which of these changes were able to incite reactions such as
for each ghastly eye jewel socketed into it. Another example is Mana Storm. This has been rebalanced to grant a lot more damage than before, alongside some more impactful mana spells. If you can get lucky, roll.
The first part of the live stream was all about PoE 2 and specifically the Ranger class, which looks cool. Seems a bit combo heavy, but as we have heard, PoE 2 is bound to be a very combo heavy game, which honestly is not a bad thing if it's done right. And from all the things we've heard from the content creators about their experience in LA, it has been done right so far. Granted, there's been a few hiccups here and there, but nothing they can't iron out during the development cycle. I got pretty surprised, I'll be honest, when they showed the mount, and as a Minion aficionado myself, I'm all for having an extra pet or just some extra mobility as the case may be. But it does make me wonder if they are available for all classes and if you get to spec into them on the skill tree or on ascendances, so they are faster, maybe stick around longer after dismounting, you know, anything like that. There's actually a lot of design potential here. They also mentioned they will be delaying PoE 2 beta till most likely around the end of the year. And I gotta say, as with most people I imagine, I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I definitely don't want them to pull a Diablo 4 on us and release a very incomplete game, all in the name of, you know, not disappointing us. So ultimately, I think it's a decision I am 100% behind, but it's still a bit disappointing, you know. I do have to say I'm still looking forward to future PoE 2 news and the Witch and Minion system reveals. Now on to PoE 1 Necropolis. We saw a lot of endgame changes, buffs, nerfs, reworks, you name it, we saw it. And starting off with the actual league mechanic, the TLDR is you have a lantern which you can use to alter the difficulty of the league mechanic in your zones, and you can pick certain rewards, some of which include itemized monsters called Embers of the All Flame, which allow you to swap monsters on your map for new ones provided by the All Flame. And some of these monsters will likely be exclusive to these Embers, and as they mentioned, they will be specterable. So I'm hoping we get to see some really cool, interesting specters come from the league mechanic. I have heard talk of some of these specters providing auras, so maybe some things from Affliction are actually making their way back. I don't have much to say about the league mechanic, aside we'll just have to see how it plays out. We're having to interact the menu before every single map and zone, unless you're in your high investment build setups where you can just take the keystone and make it all random and not care. But the reward from the mechanic has to be rewarding enough to make you feel like it's not a time sink, but as something players would be eager to interact with. They did, however, acknowledge this, so we'll have to see how it ends up feeling. We also see the return of tattoos from Trial of the Ancestor League in a nerf state, which I know was a very big crowd favorite. I'm going to be focusing more on the reworked items and patch notes. The idea of T17 non-Valdo maps, which act as a stepping stone to promote more people to take on Uber bosses, I think that is an excellent idea as someone who has never beaten an Uber boss, I believe. Have I beaten any? I don't think I have. Anyways, the design choice around that, however, might prove to have the opposite effect. And now, what do I mean by this? Well, in current PoE, boss fights are priced according to the drops from their Uber variant, so it's really never worth running the regular bosses because they use the same expensive materials. The change attempts to fix this by locking Uber bosses instead behind fragments we drop from tier 17 maps, so those can be priced differently. The reason I think it can have the opposite effect is because of how much of a grind it could potentially be. emphasis on the word potentially, as we do not actually know the drop rates of the fragments in T17s or anything, and anything is still subject to change. But it was said that we would need 5 fragments for one Uber boss fight, and with the number of Uber boss fragments there are to collect, it might be the case that players would be discouraged from even interacting with Uber bosses, because each one takes quite a few T17s to farm up, and of course buying it could also prove expensive. Whereas in the current system, just by running your regular endgame strategy, you could drop the boss item and then eventually you could spec into the node for Uber bosses when you feel ready. But of course, we all know the problems with that as it is. So we'll just have to see how this change ends up unfolding. Now, let's talk about the reworked Raid Lord, which had me scream at the beginning of the video, because that item has no business being that good. GGG. Really good stuff. Really good stuff. I love it. For those of you that don't know what the Raid Lord is / was, the Raid Lord was an item that granted 2 extra maximum specters at the steep cost of not being able to use non-specter minions. It was a very awkward item which, while being a 4-link helmet, gave 2 levels to socketed minion gems while stopping you from using specters, or from using non-specters rather. So you would use your specter gem in your 6-link chest or in your weapon squire combo, and then not have to use the level of socketed minion gems, because again, you cannot use non-specter minions. So only something like convocation would benefit, which is just very dumb. But the new version just gives +2 to, or +1 and 2 to all minion skill gems, and it increases your max specters by 4, or the number of abyssal sockets, but it doesn't seem like it can roll below 4 abyssal sockets. So 4, literally doubling the amount of previously raised specters, and increasing the max cap of specters possible to 11. And not only that, it is also now provides, like I said, 4 extra ghastly eye jewel sockets, which is huge for pure specter builds. Like I cannot overestimate how important eye jewel sockets are for minion builds in general. And when it comes to the pure specter builds, we honestly were in a spot where we would not even have enough gems to fill all our items. So by having our helmet just be abyssal sockets, beautiful. I love it. This is a change I am very excited, as you can probably tell, and part of which is because I plan on using this for my league starter. One caveat, however, is that it is now a tier 17 Katarina drop, as far as I can tell. I don't know if it can drop from any of the tier 17 bosses, but I think it's going to be a drop from tier 17 Katarina. The addition of Atlas loadouts and 3 Atlas trees is one other huge change which will shake up the foundation of just how we run the end game. I mean, I can already see people having scarab farming trees alongside juiced MF trees to use those scarabs. Maybe some setups will have like crafting setups that you'd have your currency making tree on the one, and then on the other one you have like the crafting league mechanics like rock crafted, or maybe even June or some other bestiary, even just to really go ham on your on gear crafting. And that doesn't even address just how much easier it makes rerolling your current strategy, because now you can just put it on a new tree while you still run your current one, and then when it's done you just switch over. You could even have a tree for when you have scarabs and one for when you're out of scarabs and you want the chance to get your content from the tree. Really, the sky is the limit with being able to choose between 3 different Atlas trees every map. This is a change I 100% approve of. In other patch note news, Betrayal rewards have been reworked and now all seem to be scarabs in place of any prior crafting bench, which is a change I honestly have mixed feelings for. On the one hand, I love not having to rely on TFT and having to find a buyer after running safe houses to then use your benches, and the addition of veiled orbs previously Ashling Benchcraft is obviously a huge W, makes it much easier to trade. It's a lovely change. But on the other hand, they have not mentioned a replacement currency item for like Vorichi's Old Craft, which gave between 1 to 6 white sockets on an item, or Hillock, which allowed the weapon or armor to get to 30% quality. So we'll have to see how this pans out. It is very possible that they are just saving some of these alternatives for like teasers to be released over the next week. So we'll have to wait and see. Sextants being removed, I think, is an overall positive. Nothing was more annoying than realizing you started a map and forgot to apply your sextants. I think we can all relate to that. Scarabs have now been massively reworked to take their place. And then now scarabs no longer have tiers, but now each level, let's say, now provides different effects related to the mechanic. For example, having it guaranteed to show up in your map, or another level could be you have increased reward, or this you get more of this kind of currency from it. You know, those are what we saw from the examples given. We didn't see all the scarab types, but I think it's safe to say like every league mechanic should have a scarab at this point. On to the Atlas tree. Now this might be somewhat of an unpopular opinion, but I think the removal of Wandering Path is not that big of a deal, because while it was removed, they added many increased effects nodes to replace it, like mountain modifiers, Chiseled Perfection, invasive adversaries, clusters, which all provide increased effect of modifiers on map, as well as other bonuses. There was also the addition of Back to the Basics Keystone, which gives up to 80% more effect, which might end up being even stronger than Wandering Path if strong boxes, for example, are not on the list of extra content that cannot appear in maps. If it does, however, end up being the case where you cannot have anything besides like killing mobs and the boss once you choose the node, then there might be scarabs that help with increasing unique drop rate and divination, or I guess stack deck drops. I personally 100% see endgame MF strats using this keystone with a lot of success. Plus, I don't think anything would stop the league mechanic from showing up. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. I don't know. Scarabs are seeing a lot more support on the Atlas tree with 3 new clusters and many travel nodes, which replace the previous chance for maps to be duplicated. I can already see like entire farming strategy just revolving around farming as much scarabs as possible. Essences saw a big change, with white maps only being able to roll screamings, as we see here, while those in yellow and red maps can go up to shriekings, with the potential of potentially getting deafenings strictly from Remnants of Corruption. This is going to change Essence from being a white map spam strategy because there's no advantage of doing stronger essences, to maybe being a yellow or even a red map strategy if we now have background figures like chance of rolling higher tier essences attached to like the map tier beyond just this limit that's presented. Then we also see the crystal resonance node, which also shakes up how we use these remnants of corruptions, because now when you use a remnant of corruption, the monsters imprisoned have a chance of overwriting all the other essences on the map. And why this is a big deal is now you have to be very smart about how you use your remnants of corruption, because let's say you use it on the first essence on your map and you had a wailing in there, but you also maybe had 3 wailings and you had 1 shrieking. Now you have a much higher chance of hitting just the wailings in there, and now every essence on your map is essentially bricked because they're all going to give you wailing. Versus if you were to walk a bit further and then you see one that has, let's say, 3 shriekings and 1 screaming, that's obviously a better choice, because let's say it gets upgraded, now all the essences in your map could have all deafenings, something like that. So I do see this node being very profitable, but also increases the risks that comes with using your remnants essentially. Now on to other balance changes to keep the video from getting too long. Soul Eater on both players and mobs got a big nerf, which I think is a good change. Now if you make the mistake of giving a monster 100 souls, for example, previously it would have just been jacked to the tits with attack speed, cast speed, steroids. But now it actually caps at 45 souls, and then they start losing souls if it goes like 4 seconds without receiving a soul at a rate of 2 souls a second, bringing it back down to like normal attack speed levels. Gone are the days of having a monster hidden off screen, hit for 1,000,000 attacks a second, and breaking the rest of your map. Now, if you have been on this channel a bit, you would know that I was not impressed by the removal of instant skills on left click. And my stance on that, I guess it has slightly changed since the stream, as some of the complaints I initially had have been addressed. Now, for a bit of recap of my biggest qualms with the change. They were mana costs being higher, reduced cooldown, and the lack of support for bone armor. We are going to be talking about bone armor in a bit, but on the note of the first two, I think they are still very present issues. The cooldown, worst case scenario is like, it is what it is. It's unfortunate, but what can we do? It's likely to end up on the negligible side, where you wouldn't even notice it in the in-game. Like, you wouldn't actually see the difference between how often, let's say, Molten Shell would cast before and how often it casts now. But the mana cost is going to hurt a lot of builds, which at this point can just seem as though I think those builds would just have to rework their mana management to now kind of sustain the increased mana costs, which I guess isn't the worst thing in the world, because at least there's counterplay to it versus the way bone armor was in the past, where it was just there was nothing you could do. So that is kind of where my stance is on the change right now. Now, for bone armor solution, it has been completely removed and replaced with minions have 40% of life added as extra energy shield, as well as 1% of damage dealt by your minions is leached to you as life. And this part, according to them, should lead to around a net neutral amount of minion survivability, especially when paired with the new mindless aggression, which which gives you 10% more minion damage and 20% more minion life. This as a change, I'll be honest, I am absolutely behind. It is going to be very, very, very broken. Like, honestly, it's insane how much power you just give necromancers with this one change. This leech has honestly been a class fantasy for me, and it was one of the predictions I made for Necropolis, that they would actually introduce some form of minion leech to the player. And the reason I like it, one of the reasons I like it at least, is it opens up a whole lot of like build design space for minions that was not possible before. Like, now you can take advantage of the Mahozotel's machination, which I'll put up on the screen, but you can now take advantage of that, which with the leech you get, and you would not have to use zombies and the Baron helmets to do that, right? It provides so much in the way of like utility defenses for summoner that I honestly see the Guardian as being just straight up inferior to Necromancy when it comes to on-hit minion builds at least. When it comes to dots, because dots cannot be leeched, then the Guardian like becomes more of an option, but then you would not need the auras and such. So I would still lean towards Necromancer or overall for any kind of minion build. The extra ES also provides more survivability in certain aspects, where now they just have a bigger hit pool, so they are much harder to one-shot overall. But then the caveat is they are now more susceptible to bleeds and just damage over times in general, which because of the nature of those kind of damage sources, it would prevent energy shield from recharging. But in general, with all the access we have to like giving minions leech for themselves, and then minion physical damage reduction to reduce bleeds, minion life regen, I think dots overall are very manageable, and this is going to be overall a net increase in like the cases where minions are tankier, if that makes sense. And while we mentioned the Guardian, the Sentinel of Radiance also got big nerfs. its HP burn has been cut by 33%, going from 30% of its maximum life to 20%. And its radius, keep in mind this is radius, not its radius, has been reduced by 0.5 meters. So now this is going to make it I want to say decently harder to scale the area of effect of said burn. So I think the ascendancy should still be fine. It's just it's not going to be as strong as it was in the previous 2 seasons since its introduction. Now for a quick run through of notable skill gem changes. Bama of Prismatic Clones now has a 25% more damage modifier with elemental arrows. Tornado Shot and Penance Brand have been both nerfed, with the general consensus around Tornado Shot's nerf, if I can talk, still being fine. Like the skill is still fine. It's just more expensive to reach the similar levels you would have gotten last league if you can get to it, because you just lost a projectile for free. Where's Tornado Shot right here? You just lost the extra projectile you got off of quality essentially. Summon Raging Spirits also got a notable nerf, losing its natural more damage modifier. Now it's good to note that this more modifier is innate to the melee attack, so stuff like Popcorn SRS is completely unaffected. But this nerf should hit, I'm thinking, Elemental SRS pretty hard, because now you're just losing 38% more damage as a modifier, right? And then the poison variant should also see a nerf, because this is a modifier that affected the poison. But it's worth noting that the poison variants got Unholy Might rework, and what only Unholy Might now does is it converts 100% of minion physical damage to chaos damage. And if you didn't know this about SRS, they do 100% physical damage, but they have a native 100% fizz to fire conversion that is on the gem itself. So what this should mean effectively is now you can actually convert 50% of their base damage to physical, of their base physical damage to chaos rather, and then the 50% other one goes to fire. So that 50% that goes to chaos can now poison and can now contribute to the actual poison damage. So I think overall, I don't know where poison SRS is going to be, but it's not just nerfs in that department. Now to circle back a bit to the ascendancy changes, and specifically the extra life as ES that minions now get, it is worth noting that on some of my builds and just in minion builds in general, we no longer have to take grave intentions to get life as ES. And why is this important? This is important because as someone who likes using Guardian Blessing, I would typically have to take this note to then get ES on my Animate Guardian, to when combined with Mask of the Stitch Demon would give me life regen to counter Guardian's Blessings degen. But by having this on the Ascendancy now, this extra ES, I essentially can now forego grave intentions and just use the points elsewhere, as I will now just straight up have enough life regen, again paired with Mask of the Stitch Demon to counter Guardian's Blessings degen. So that's just something that is now a big positive for going for Necromancer if you do want to use Guardian's Blessing. Overall, I'm super excited with the changes and I am looking forward to League launch. And on that note, after seeing all the changes, I have decided that my League starter is going to be pure minions using the buff Raid Lord to push the damage and Spectre counts. And I will be League start testing this, and if all goes well, I should have a video for you guys next week before launch. There is a lot of planning that has to be done, from like what Spectres I have to use to level, when to transition to Raid Lord if Raid Lord is expensive, when like this becomes even more of a problem or more of a farming thing. Spectres I would have to use up until when I can use my Spectres of choice, and I would keep an eye out for any interesting Spectres that do show up from the League. But my current plan is to build around the Baronite Preachers, which are mobs that use ball lightning. And if you didn't know anything about ball lightning, it has a lot of overlap potential, and it could honestly lead to very, very nasty single target damage and wave clear, depending on the gem swaps you're willing to do. They show up in Crusader influence map, and as such, much of the build's specters or early progression will actually have to be done with something else rather than Baronite Preachers, unless of course someone on like global 6666 gets them pretty early and is willing to share. So like that is part of what I'm going to be figuring out this next week as I test it, and we'll see how it goes. And honestly, this turned out to be a pretty long video, but I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Did I miss anything? What changes are you most excited for? Did something completely shift your League Start plans? Were any of Necropolis predictions spot on? Let me know down in the comments, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss out on the League Start video coming next week. And with that said, thank you for watching.